Hey, what's up, guys? So, today I'm really wanting to talk to y'all about spiritual warfare. And it, I've got a lot to say, so if it starts running too long, I may make this into a couple of videos instead of just one. But I wanted to preface this with you guys know that I used to fight. I grew up, in karate doing things like that. But I got to train with many people that were the highest level in their arts. I mean, guys that were in the Martial Arts Hall of Fame, grandmasters from around the world, senior grandmasters. And one of the things that was so different about them was their perspective on fighting, the way that they actually approached a fight. And there's a couple of things that we can take from that into spiritual warfare. And the first of which is that, with mastery of something, mastery of the warfare, it actually brings rest instead of fighting. And if we look at Jesus, when he walked on earth, Jesus walked in peace. And as a matter of fact, in John 14:27, he says, I leave you with my peace. He says, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives, but do not let your hearts be troubled or be afraid. And so rest is something that people who have mastered what they're doing can enter into. And rest is ultimately the goal of our walk with Christ. It's ultimately the goal of spiritual warfare. And the reason why we rest is because if you come out swinging and you want to fight everything that comes in front of you, then you're going to wear yourself out and you're going to wear yourself down. And you need to be able to pick your battles and to wait for the opportunities to present themselves, to be able to use the right technique at the right time and not be wasting energy. That's the difference between like a red belt and a black belt. Red is the belt before black because it's the belt of danger. They know a lot of stuff, they can do a lot of stuff, but they haven't quite entered into that rest, that mastery that comes with the black belt. And the other thing that the masters of these arts did was that they redefined what power looked like. They redefined strength. Because when we trained with them, they didn't try to break, a bunch of boards or concrete or anything like that, because anybody can do that. And any big brute without any kind of training can come through and start smashing, wood and bricks and stuff like that. What they did was they measured strength based on how gentle you could be, how much control you had over the strength and the technique that had been developed. And so, we would train to punch full speed as hard and as fast as we could and just wick the sweat off of the end of somebody's nose. And that's like what God did for us, because he stepped down into our level and he wrapped his power in human flesh in the person of Jesus Christ and came to this world, and he walked with authority, but he walked with gentleness. He had controlled strength. And so he could have called, the armies of heaven down. He could have done all these other things, but he was on God's time. He was on God's plan, and he did what God told him to do. He waited for the right time, the right people, in order to capitalize on those opportunities. And we need to remember, like Exodus 14:14, this battle is the Lord's, you need only be still. Philippians 4:8 says, fill your mind with the things that are good and praiseworthy. James 4:7 says, submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. And guys, what all of this points to is that we need to have rest in God. He is our strength. And when we focus on God, when we keep our mind on the things that are good and praiseworthy, we are inherently resisting the devil. That means you naturally resist the devil. And it's written that when you resist the devil, he must flee. So we submit ourselves to God's path. We submit ourselves to being placed where God wants us to be in order to carry out his mission and his purpose, not for our own, but for him and for his glory. So that means no matter what we see going on, see, a lot of times wars, if you look at World War II and all these other major wars, the war was taking place between the nations. But the people on the front lines, they saw the battles. They saw the results of what was happening. And guys, I'm telling you, this war, we do not war against the flesh. And the things that we see, in this world are a result of what's going on in heaven. It's a result of God's path. But we have victory, guys. We already have victory through the cross. And you have to remember that and hold on to that. And I know it gets hard sometimes when we're looking at ourselves and we're looking at, the things that either we're trying to be good enough, or we feel like we're being, we're too bad, and can't let go of certain things. But I would say this: if you think that you're bad, or you think that you're weak, you do not realize how weak and how bad you actually are. Because when you realize how weak and how bad you actually are, you let go of that attitude of thinking that you're weak and thinking that you're bad, because you're placing yourself in a position where you think that you can recover whatever you're doing, that you can get better, that you can fix it, and you can't. The only way to fix that, the only way to get rid of that ancient curse that's within all of us, that sin nature that we're born into, is to totally submit to God and to lay your life down to Him. Because whatever we give to God, He makes good. From the beginning of time, what God did was He took the world that was dark and formless and void, and He made it good. I mean, it's just who He is. That's what He does. And so you have to recognize that's it. That you can't do it, and you won't do it, so that you will actually lay it down. You will let go. You will cut those ties. Because remember, when Jesus walked on this earth, the devil couldn't get a hold of Him, right? That's how Christ defeated the devil in His walk, is that the devil had no hook that was in Him. He resisted the devil fully. He never sinned. He never allowed the devil to get a foothold into Him. But we have to be courageous. And remember, being courageous is literally not having fear, but being courageous is where you have courage. You know that there's something better in the face of fear, so that you know what's going on isn't the end of the story. It's not what it looks like. But if you walk in victory, what I don't understand about some people is that they will say that they walk in victory, and they will decree it and they will declare it all day long, but then they fight every battle that comes up, every single thing that comes against them. What they do is they want to turn and they want to, have some kind of spiritual warfare, some kind of attack. And that doesn't make sense, guys. If you walk in victory, then certain things should be old news. Certain things shouldn't be new. Certain things should just bounce off of you. You shouldn't even pay any attention to them, because as we mature, we recognize that temptation is something that is within us. It's part of that sin nature that we can't correct or can't get rid of. And that because we lay our life down to Christ, we recognize that temptation, right? Because we know that God will test us, and we go through the refining process of getting rid of that temptation and resisting it. It's like a tree that grows, right? Like as it grows, it doesn't have the same kind of struggles and the same kind of hardships or things that it had to battle as it did in the beginning. Because every little thing can uproot a brand new plant is delicate. But a tree that's been established, like we establish ourselves in our faith, that is something that is sturdy and stable and built on a firm foundation and isn't shaken easily and can bear fruit and can do all of these things that we read about in the Bible. But the mindset has got to be right. And just kind of as an example, like if you have a problem in your life and you correct it, because we're kingdom minded, think about it in terms of this. If you have a problem in your life and you correct it, what good did you do? It's a kingdom mindset says that this life is just a mist. It's just a vapor. You know, you have to stay hungry for God in this life. You have to not pay attention to the things of this world that can come against you. But the easiest way for you to lose focus on God is to get like a little full off of something that doesn't matter, right? Like if you get a little full, you got a little win from some kind of distraction that you had, you're going to feel a little more satisfied and you're going to feel a little less hungry for God. You got to stay hungry for God and stay hungry all the time. One of the worst things that you could do is to be successful at the wrong thing, right? Like we talk about leadership, we talk about success and things like that, but you have to be successful at the right thing, which is successful in the kingdom. You know, and now that's not something that is just, you know, thrown around or whatever. What matters, what's of value, what's of purpose is God's plan. And we're here to serve God. You know, Romans 12, 1 and 2 says, therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true worship. Do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. You know, we renew our minds because the transformation comes from within. Like we all walk and stumble through life. You know, we're learning and growing stronger through endurance, but endurance is what shapes our character. And through the seasons of the good and bad, we grow more established in our faith. It's just part of that process of refinement, that process of strengthening, that process of character building. And we learn, like what 1 Thessalonians 5:17-18 says, we learn to pray continually, giving thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. We come to know that God, who said, let light shine out of the darkness, made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ. 2 Corinthians 4:6. We begin to understand that Philippians 4:3, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, is actually a testimony verse from the verse before it, which says, I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned to be content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. We realize that all of these things come together for the kingdom mindset, the true spiritual warfare mindset. Because the change starts with you turning your heart to God. I mean, that's where it has to be. You have to have a heart for God. But I know many people who try to struggle with that. Or they don't try to struggle, but they do struggle with that because they're trying to have a heart for God, but they just don't understand how to do that and how to walk in the peace that Jesus left for us. Well, I'll tell you, you do that if you can't change your heart to God, if you don't just have that realization, walk in obedience to God. That's the purpose of the law. Walk in obedience to God to see how his truths come to pass, to see your reflection in the mirror, which tells you that you are a sinner and that you will never be able to change and to be holy enough or righteous enough, to come into God's fullness. And it makes sense when we think about it like this. Like, if you smile, right? Like, if I walk up, I'm like, hey, how's it going? It's because I'm happy on the inside. I'm truly happy, and it shows through my face. It shows through a smile. But if you're not happy and you don't feel like smiling, and you smile anyways, and you get around people that are laughing, and you're doing the things that happy people are doing, guess what? You will become happy. It's just part of it. Iron sharpens iron. So that's why we try to pay attention to the influences that we have and the people that we're around. But a lot of people are still trying to be a good person. And I would tell you, don't do that. I know that sounds weird, but the reason why I'm saying that is because if you try to be a good person, you're basically trying to do good deeds. You're trying to do good works. And it places limitations on yourself, and it makes it hard like that. What I would say is be available. Like, be there for your friend. If like seek the opportunities to fill the needs that come in life. But take care of your friend, right? If you want to be a good friend, just take care of your friend. And then guess what? You will be a good friend. The only good that any of us actually have is the righteousness which comes from the blood of Christ. And that's the same for each and every one of us. So when you try to add something to that, when you try to do more good deeds to try to be a good person or a good friend or whatever it is, instead of just loving them, because Jesus says, if you love me, you will obey my commands. But if you have that old mentality that I just talked about, it's like taking a bottle of water and pouring it into the ocean and saying you added something to it. You don't see it, because the blood of Christ is what covers us. And his righteousness is what shows through, is what sanctifies us, is what makes us right with God. It's through him and him alone. So do what he says, which is love God and love others. But if you do that, you can serve your purpose. And people get caught up in preparing and learning how to be equipped for different spiritual battles and things like that. But the only thing that you need is the presence of God. It's pretty cut and dry. There's either God or not of God. And so if something's not of God, then God has victory over it. And you walk with God. Stay close to God. But this is why worship is so effective. Because worship and praise, what that does is it not only puts things in their proper order, but it makes you focus on God. It keeps your mind for him. But see, like Hebrews 12:2 says, we fix our eyes on Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. But see, because worship sets God above your priorities. You don't think about what's going on in your life when you're in worship. That's why we feel the presence of God. That's why when we get deep in worship, it's because we're focusing. And by focusing, we are inherently resisting the devil. But it's through like the revelation that comes from constant prayer, which constant prayer is what focuses our minds on God. You pray to God in the good and in the bad. It doesn't matter what's going on. Talk to God so that you are renewing your mind and you are refreshing your mind day by day. You are growing closer to God and growing stronger, because we're becoming as wise as serpents but innocent as doves. We've seen the wickedness and the evil in the world. We've overcome trials that, through our walk, through different seasons of our life, and we're becoming stronger and more mature in our faith. But it's through the revelation that comes with this is where we can show like the beauty and the importance of Christ to other people. Inspiration comes through revealing beauty and purpose, which is what we have through Christ. But just a kind of a real world example is like, nobody has ever walked into a store and wanted to learn how to play a guitar because they saw a guitar. What made them want to learn that instrument is because they heard a song that touched their heart. And that's why you have to show the beauty and the purpose and what can be done with the tools that are there, what can be done with the things that they need in order for them to actually step and walk into it and to live out their purpose and their calling, to be inspired in whatever way, walk, and gifting that somebody has. But you can do that just with what you already have. You don't need anything other than God. Give it to God. He will make it good. And I love this quote. I heard it from somebody, I can't remember who it was from, but they said, "The devil knows your name and he calls you by your sin, but God knows your sins and he will call you by your name." That's why we trust in God. That's why we trust Him. Because when you lay it down and you give it to Him, you realize that spiritual warfare is just simply rest. If you trust in God and you truly trust in God, then why would you worry? If you really trust in God, if you are worrying about an area in your life and you have anxiety over an area in your life, then I would question your submission to God in that area. Because we, here on earth, are just vessels for God. We are conduits of heaven, and we are called for His purpose and His purpose alone. There's nothing else that we are called to do, and there's nothing greater that we could do. But we have to remember that it's God's path. Just like Paul and Silas, when they were in the prison, right? They could have very easily missed the opportunity to save the jailer because they were rebuking, if they had rebuked their situation that they were in. But instead of rebuking the situation that they were in, they were looking for the opportunity to be able to serve God and to glorify God. And it ended up, that's the same group of people that founded the Philippian church. Okay, so don't miss the opportunities that God is presenting before you. And the ultimate goal, like I said, is just to let yourself go away. Die to yourself. Completely die to yourself. Because if God is a light that's within you, right, just using this example, if He's a light that's within you, the only thing that your flesh does is it blocks that light from coming out. So in all situations, make sure that you glorify God. Make sure that you are always seeking out His purpose and that you have your mind focused on God and focused on the things above. Because the devil will come in any way that he can to try to shake you and rattle you and be screaming at you, roaring like a lion looking for prey, trying to make you move. But you are called to stand firm and be a beacon of light to the world. You are called to stand firm. Put on the full armor of God, which is all defensive except for the word of God, because that's all you need. If you need to strike something down, cast something out, if you need to rebuke something. But you always wear righteousness as your breastplate. You always wear the belt of truth. You always walk with the sandals of the gospel of peace. You pick up your shield of faithfulness. You put on your helmet of salvation, and you pick up the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of truth. But all of that is the armor of God. And I'll leave you guys with this last thing. When you are at peace in the flesh, you are the greatest warrior that you can be in the Spirit. Because you are not distracted, you are focused on God, and you learn to love through your experiences. And when you are fighting, you're experiencing the world. When you're at peace, you're experiencing God. So, know God, love God, and serve Him. Fear Him and what He can do above everything else that is in this world, because that will keep you focused, that will keep you obedient, and that will keep you in line and on His path. But I love you guys, and I will talk to you all on Sunday.